Well, Charles, I mean, I'm incredibly excited to have you here with us today. You've been successful in a variety of different industries. You pride yourself on being a connector and an individual that can put people together and make things happen. So I'm really excited for everybody to get to know you better. And for the people who don't know you very well yet, tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I guess unofficially, I don't even want to use the term as celebrity trainer, just a trainer model for a long time.
Okay.
And from all that, from all those arenas, kind of adopted or got adopted by a lot of toxic mentors. I went into, I'd be very transparent, got into addiction, got into some really bad habits. Was addicted to alcohol and pills for 7 years.
Yeah.
And now, like I said, 10 years, for a decade. I'm now 7 years into my recovery.
Nice.
So a lot of it's been a lot of reframing. So from all that, rebuilding myself from scratch, still having a lot of those skill sets, but, being a better version. What I think that I am now, what this looks like is I created the man that I always needed when I was growing up.
That's awesome.
I heard that thing, so.
Definitely.
That's it.
Well, for me, I guess we have a lot more in common than we thought. I've been in recovery now for 10 years also. Same problem, was mostly alcohol and benzos, pills, but same with you?
Yep, benzos. Yeah. Xanax.
Man, then we're Xanax for me too. So we're probably a lot more alike than we care to admit if we had the same poison of choice. So, well, for you, you've been in so many different industries, and we could probably talk for hours about the different businesses and how you've been successful. But what I'd really like to get into first is, how would you really define that toxic masculinity, and how does that really show up in someone's career? Like you mentioned, you had a few mentors early on in your career that were really toxic. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and what I mean by that, the toxic masculinity, is that, like, as a man, you're expected to whatever that is.
Yeah.
And those mentors and a lot of those expectations are, as a man, you're expected to do this, and you're not expected to have any emotions. So there's a lot of suppression. You're not allowed to feel fear, and fear is like one of those intrinsic emotions that let you know that you're alive. So when I got into the automotive industry, which I started at a young age, I was making six figures. I was making substantially more than anyone in my family had ever, but I didn't know how to deal with that. So I was feeling all these things, going through all these emotions, and these mentors were like, you know what you do? You gotta bottle that up. You gotta just suck that up and keep going. So that's when the introduction to the benzos came for me. Like, I was feeling all these things. I was a young sales manager. I had a family. I was an expectant father. I had all these things that I couldn't palate.
Yeah.
So, they told me about this pill, a Go pill, which literally takes everything away. Like, so Xanax was awesome for me because I didn't feel that. I didn't feel the feeling of the anxiety and the stress manifesting. It just allowed me to function. And in that high production area that I was in as a finance manager, director, sales guy, you got to produce. It's a turn and burn. So after a while, how it becomes toxic is you're not identifying the things around you. You're not identifying, you're starting to negate your emotions. You're starting to, be horrible to your family. And the reason why that is because we're told that that's a part of being a male. Right. Yeah. The toxicity of masculinity is what it comes to. And that's, again, it's toxic mentors.
Yeah. Well, they definitely got that right about Xanax. If they told you, hey, you just take this and it'll take all that away, for sure does for the period of time that you're high, for sure. It'll definitely take all those anxieties away. But problem is, once you come down, it's all still right there. And you have no choice but to either keep self-medicating over and over to keep that fear and that pain and that anxiety away, or eventually you got to face it. So, yeah. Okay. And how do you think toxic masculinity really affects a man's mental health?
It affects it in a large degree because as men, we were, that toxic aspect of it from a lot of our fathers, their grandfathers, you do not show any kind of emotion, right?
Yeah.
Emotion is seen as weakness, right? Yeah. But that emotion is kind of conveying, it lets everybody else know. It's a yardstick to let everyone else around us know where we're at, right? It's important for us not to, to suppress those things. That's why suicide with men is so high, right? So Aaron was just on here, and suicide rate for soldiers is high. Do you know that suicide kills more soldiers than the war kills vets?
That's crazy.
Okay. a lot of that is because of that masculinity that these guys are instilled with, that they can't unshovel and unwrap after they get out, right?
Yep.
So how does that affect them? They're not able to identify the things that they're feeling inside. And it's hard, right? And again, I see it even with the whole paradigm of the framing with the CTE, traumatic brain injury and all that. When men, we get these injuries, we're told to never convey that we're hurt or we're injured. So we keep going. Well, that's systemic. It keeps building and compounding, right? That in itself, the root of that, the origin of that is all toxic masculinity, not being able to be who we are, right?
The idea to just man up, being kind of the blanket answer to everything.
Yeah, and the thing that's so wrong about it, man, is like the framework, right? The visage or the whole idea of what an alpha is wrong, right? A true alpha, if we were to go back into the jungles, we were to look at the primates, where that whole term was derived from the alpha, which was the alpha ape. Right?
Yeah.
When a lot of these men use that term, they strip it of emotion, of a lot of the things that make that alpha ape what it is. An alpha ape is very nurturing. It's very understanding. It is very protective, and it does have those strengths as factors, but that's a baseline. That's only a component of what makes it a strong leader.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody looks at the alpha as the leader of the pack. It is that, but there's more dynamic to just that. My guys, some of my military guys, they use apex, because they go so much further. And that's still, to me, that's a toxicity in their masculinity. Well, I'm the apex predator. You know why? I'm like, well, tell me why. The apex is the highest form of blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you still realize that's still toxic, bro.
Yeah.
Still very, very toxic.
So it sounds like they're a little bit too focused on the fact that the alpha or the apex is just the top person on the top of whatever pyramid we're talking about, and they're not really looking at what qualities that leader needs to have, right?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
The qualities.
Awesome. Okay. And so as how would you define like a true alpha? Like, what is that supposed to look like?
Let me define it. I won't even define it as how about not as in a frame, but how about as a person, to give you a visual of what that looks like. Do you follow basketball?
Not much, but I follow it enough for sure.
Yeah, so you know about the guy, Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant and
Definitely.
all them. So you've heard about some of the coaching, Pat Riley or Phil Jackson.
Yeah.
Phil Jackson is an alpha. Phil Jackson is a guy who's able to, that team, manage and lead a group of very strong men and varying degrees of personalities, able to mirror those personalities, able to be malleable and not so rigid, able to adapt themselves within that framework and still lead. Lead without instruction is what, to me, embodies a true alpha. Right?
Got it. Okay. And what are some of the misconceptions that you think, if you were to ask, let's say a 12-year-old boy right now, your average 12-year-old American boy, what they think an alpha is, what do you think they would say? So what do you think is society's view of what an alpha is?
It depends on which generation you want to talk to. I don't know if this millennial generation even has that word as a context, right? I really don't. So to be honest, I don't know if they'd even have a way to explain that. There's so much inclusion that I don't know if there's an alpha because everybody gets to do everything.
Yeah. Maybe a better question is, what was it like when we were growing up? Like when you were 10, 12 years old, what do you remember thinking the alpha was supposed to be?
Yeah, man. That's a really good question. So the alphas for me growing up were like the Arnold, the Arnold Schwarzeneggers. They were the bosses. They were the big, strong guys, visually how I look, but they commanded respect. They were the tough guys. If anything happened, they took care of it. They were men of action. Yeah. And then, but the problem with that is what happens when they go behind closed doors. It was just the one aspect that I only knew. But so it was just tough guys. I only knew as an alpha to be the tough guy. The quote unquote, excuse my language, badass. For lack of better words.
Awesome. Well, you mentioned you had a few toxic mentors early in your career, and you got into some bad things with that. What was your journey after that? So how did you? I guess what was the point where you realized that your addiction was a problem and you needed to do something about it?
Yeah, so we go over that a bunch, man. And I think the biggest thing that happened to me was I got out of car business because I was spiraling down hard, and what it took for me to keep going wasn't sustainable, right? Yeah. It was just, it required too much. So I started coaching track, and I was coaching a bunch of kids and doing really well and thinking that, everything is going really well, that I'm this great coach and people see me a certain way. One day I get a call from one of my parents, right? He's like, hey, do you think you can call me before practice? I said, yeah, no problem. So, and he starts to go on, he was an ex-athlete, he was an ex-NFL football player, and he starts to go into this story about, hey, you know what my coach used to tell us? When cops pull you over, always make sure you have some peanuts. I was like, well, why have peanuts? He goes, you know what peanuts do, right? They're very strong and very distinctive smell. They mask everything. So Charles, if you're drinking, no one will be able to smell that. Some of the kids told me that they can smell it on you sometimes. So he wasn't telling me, Joe, to discourage me. He was telling me to make sure that it wasn't so visible to these kids that I was coaching.
Wow.
Broke. Done. Because here I am thinking I'm like this guy, nobody knows. Man, I got it in my bottle. It's masked with vodka and all this. I got my cologne on. No one knows. So, yeah, I'm out.
Man, I can relate to that so much. I remember I was working in kitchens at the time, and I remember one of my chefs pulling me aside and having a very, very similar conversation. It was the end of our shift, and we were walking out at the same time, and he said something to me like, you know, what you really need to do is you need to make sure that you're keeping breath mints or something like that, so that you don't get caught. And he didn't say don't drink on the job. He didn't say, hey, I know a place where you can get some help or anything like that. He said, here's a great way to hide your problem. So
it is, and I can even hear in your voice, it hurts, man. It's hard. It's like I remember one time when we had a track meet, and one of the biggest things for me, people always think a lot of the addiction, it comes from the fact that we just like it, but once you get to that point of addiction, it's not. It's that I need it just to be able to do, right?
Yeah.
So we were at an event, and I usually would have something so I can just manage it. For me, it wasn't so I had a lot of things that were going on, fears, things that I couldn't be. So that helped suppress that, and it gave me liquid courage, for lack of better words. So we were at a meet, and I had a lot of things, and it was my daughter's track meet.
Yeah.
I remember this very vividly. Like I would always have vodka, before the track meets. I'd have vodka in my, in my Gatorade, because again, what is vodka? It smells,
Yeah.
It doesn't have a smell, and you can mask it with anything. So we had all these vodka bottles, and my daughter was getting ready for a meet. If we hadn't looked, she would have grabbed mine. And she was tired. She had just ran out of an event. She would have just taken a big chug.
Wow.
And what could have happened? And so I think about that. I think about, the different times that I would have drank and driven with other people in my car, right? And how many times. So I don't know why that one specific instance registered to me, man, but there were many of them. There were so many flags.
Yeah, I remember when people ask me about it, they'll say, did you ever kill anybody or anything like that? And I'm like, I hope not. But not to my knowledge, but I definitely did some things that I'm not proud of drinking and driving way too many times. And who knows? Because I woke up plenty of times not remembering the night before.
The other thing, did you ever get this, is that I didn't know. Now I've come out, I've been super transparent about it. Mm-hmm. And I've had so many people that were like, I didn't know. I didn't know it was that bad. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely had that too.
Yeah.
Sure. So usually the people that you would maybe drink or party with, they weren't that bad. So they kind of assumed that, you were just two guys hanging out and drinking together, and they didn't realize that it was a completely different experience for you. You weren't just having 2 or 3 beers at the bar with them. You were probably drunk when you got to the bar already. So
how about I never stopped?
Yeah.
How about, waking up, I started at 6:00, and it was just something that it was crazy to me. A good friend of mine, like you're saying, buddies. Yeah. I went back and I saw him. We were hanging out, and it was in the morning. It was 7, right? We were all waking up, and he has Chardonnay. And I'm like, that's wild, right? But I used to do that, and it was so odd to me. And I'm just looking at this behavior that I didn't understand, that I used to ascribe to, like ask her, my lady. I used to have champagne. I knew when you can go and get it. In fact, I had a guy at the little QT near my house that would always give me, whatever I needed, even past the point of when you can get it.
Yeah.
Because he was my guy, so.
I had the same thing. I knew which liquor stores were open earliest and where and what time they closed and everything like that. I knew all my options in my area, everything. Wow. Yeah, so we got a lot in common for sure.
I would, people talk about even working wise. They're like, there's no way I knew that you were drinking. I'm like, yeah, you know what we do on breaks?
Yeah.
You know what we do on breaks on lunch? We'd go over to, Red Apple or whatever, Red Robin or whatever. We would have a few drinks during happy hour. Then we'd come back and produce. But what it started for me was when I was young and I was in the business. I was with all these older guys. They were, and I mean older, they would have been our father's age. Like they'd be in their 60s. And I would have been 20, they would be 40, 50, right?
Yeah.
So they taught me how to deal with what people do, just the human condition. Like people are going to be this, they're going to be that. And instead of how I deal with it now, which is like that, it's nothing that people say is about you. Yeah. I took everything personally. And it hurt and it bothered me. So the way they taught me to suppress it was you just drink, you just pop these pills, you just do this, you take this Xanax, you take these perks. In fact, we used to all try to get those before shifts because that's how you really produce. We had awards for guys who produced on pills. How about that?
Yeah.
Or you get, so the thing that and I'm sorry for going on this rant, but I want things like this to do is to bring light of it. Yeah. There's so many people that I've said things, and even if you look on my social, I'll talk about my recovery, I'll talk about different times, and they'll say, Charles, I didn't know that. Like even you and I right now, I didn't know that. I didn't know to the degree. My doctor is on my page. He would see me every day, like when I was dope sick, going in for my Xanax.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people around us don't realize because when they picture an alcoholic or a drug addict, they imagine that we're kind of stumbling into family functions or we're always noticeably intoxicated. And I think what they don't realize is that's actually pretty rare because for someone like us, it actually takes a lot to get us that visibly intoxicated. Probably 80-90% of the time, we're operating at a, 0.08 blood alcohol content, and that's what people perceive as normal. That's our normal personality. So, because that's what we need to feel normal when we're at that point. So, yeah, I mean, if anybody feels that way, if you need to have a certain blood alcohol content to operate and function and feel normal, that's not normal. Other people out there, because I remember thinking it was normal for me for a while, thinking because it was my normal that I needed. But the rest of the world doesn't need to have a couple drinks before going to a family dinner or something like that. They can just handle life sober. So, yeah.
The fact that you and I are talking about that and we're saying that that's not normal, do you know how many people I'm sure are going to listen to this and be like, well, what's wrong with that?
Yeah.
What's wrong with that?
Yeah.
So you need to drink, right, which is a form of medication.
Yeah.
You need to medicate before you do this. Or, a lot of my guys, they don't understand why when they're bored, that is an okay go-to.
Yeah.
I said there's a million different things that you can do when you're bored that's not going to destroy your body.
Yeah.
Like I get it, but, and again, I don't try to get on the diatribe. The biggest concern that I have about alcohol and even the pills is that had I had more information, had I had more insight, I think that I would have taken a different route. Had a lot of the other things that we talk about been expressed to me, I think that I would have had a different route. So like now I think that, again, it's good to be conveyant that these are things that are very real. Yeah. In fact, I think it's now 80% of adults suffer from alcoholism.
Yeah.
And some form of addiction. And again, you don't call it, and they're not even calling it addiction because their doctor's giving it to them.
Yeah.
So those statistics are only based on people that are identifying themselves like you and I are as addicts.
Yeah.
How many parents every day, they call it now adulting, will have a drink in front of their kids and all that. So what are you teaching that generation?
Yeah.
I don't even know what the framing for that is. I know toxic masculinity, but what is that, toxic parenting?
Yeah, it's interesting too because I'm not somebody who thinks that everybody who drinks is an alcoholic or has a problem, because I know plenty of people who can actually have a beer or two at dinner, be completely fine, and don't think about it again until the next social occasion where it comes up. I just know that that's not how it affects me, and I know that it affects everybody else differently. So yeah, if you have to have a blood alcohol content to function, that's definitely something for you to take a look at.
To be normal. Yeah.
Wow. Well, for you, I mean, we talked a bit about toxic masculinity also, and how do you feel like toxic masculinity affects the relationship dynamic between men and women?
I love this one.
Yeah.
And the reason why I want to do this is because I've had a lot of different challenges in my life, and not only my life, but my relationships, because of what you feel masculinity should be.
Yeah.
So for us as a guy in that framework, I've always been a good looking guy, modeled this, that, so the terminology or the label that I get is player. And that term is celebrated. Like, it's dope to be a player. It's dope to have a bunch of females and all that. As you get older, you see the fallout. You see the infidelity. You see what the impact of all those things, how toxic it is to be the player and the people that you hurt.
Yeah.
So I firsthand have seen how those instances, play a role, and how that, is, it's horrible. It's horrible that as men, we're encouraged to be that way. And you look on the converse, right? Females that, enjoy interactions with men and all that, they're considered a completely different thing. And I don't even want to use the word, but it's not fair. It's not, it's not equitable,
Yeah.
But again, like I said, with males and the way society is, we live in a very male dominant society. It's cool to be this kind of player, this chauvinistic person. Especially now, especially now, like, we have Tate, Andrew Tate, to be brash, arrogant, whatever, over the top, the damn Blazarians.
Yeah.
Our society gravitates to people like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
why do you think they do? Because I've noticed the same thing too, and it bothers me at times, for sure. I'm like, why is it so many people watching this sort of thing? Why are they enjoying it? So what do you think is attractive to so many people about that?
I think it is. I think as we're consumers, but I think a lot of it is excess. When you see these guys, they scream excess in the nth degree, right? They live lives that we can only imagine, and they do things that we can never even dream of.
Yeah.
So the problem with that is that society is what feeds these demons, right?
Yeah.
They feed these guys, and once these guys get fed, their appetite starts to become insatiable. Then they can't quench it, and that's why you see these guys do the things that they do. Like, it all starts harmless, but again, you're built up. Like Conor McGregor, absolutely love the guy, love his origin story, but you can kind of see where he's kind of lost and been off the beaten path, because he's been fed so much that now he's become this demigod. He thinks that he can do anything and say whatever, and it's not the guy that we remember. It's not the organic, the guy that we used to reach out, the people's champ. He's starting to go away from that, and now he's like the villain, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I guess excess, you're right. The idea of excess can get out of hand really quickly.
Yes,
it's
sir.
like the idea of, say, having one excellent wife or partner is a great thing. So if you have 3 excellent wives, then that's even better, or something. So you can see it get really out of hand really, really quickly, for sure. Okay, that makes sense. Well, how do you think, as society, like, how do you think we make some progress on these issues? How do you think we can kind of change what the next generation is being taught and what their view is of healthy relationships and healthy forms of masculinity?
It's kind of redundant and everybody keeps on saying it, but I think even what we're doing right now, having these discussions, is one of the things that kind of helps, break down these paradigms.
Yeah.
The other thing, my guy, and we kind of talk about this, there's a decade of distinction, right? So like when you and I were coming up, there's guys that we looked at, and there's a decade between them where we looked at them and we can identify with them. I think that it's going to come up, we're going to have another group of storytellers that's going to have to be cultivated to identify with this generation, even beneath us, right? And I don't really know if that's happened. Like, so, and when I say that is like the guys that we're looking at now, the Joe Rogans, my children, our children aren't looking at those guys, right? They're not looking at the Jordan Petersons or the Rogans. So it's going to be up to us to start, kind of ushering in a new way, because I think that we can kind of liaise with the new generation, right? Between the old and the new. So it is going to be having, healthy conversations, right?
Yeah.
And doing them like with Discord, like not being, not using ego, strapping everything, just trying to figure out how we keep this thing going.
Yeah, definitely. And how do you think we can create some more, you talked about how this idea of toxic masculinity is basically men not really feeling like it's okay for them to let their emotions out, not really feeling like it's okay for them to have emotions in the first place. So how do you think we can create some safe spaces and make it a little bit more acceptable for men to share their emotions or have emotions?
It takes a village, right?
Yeah.
And I really mean that. I think that we have to go back to our tribal like nature, right? I think we have to be very primal. I think that men as men need to grab each other and start to kind of nurture and care for one another, right? So one of the biggest things that I do, like I have like men's groups, I have groups that I belong to. And as men, I have very strong men keep me accountable. And what I mean by that accountability, right? As men, you're going to be struck. You're going to be riddled by temptation. I'm feeling like I want to step out. I'm feeling like this. So I have guys that I talk to. Hey, you feel that way? You want to step out? What's going to happen when you do that?
Yeah.
You're going to lose a person that you've loved for 10 years. I have guys that call me because they're like, you know what, man, I don't feel good, man. I feel like ending it all. Well, tell me why you feel that. That's a tough thing, man. I got to tell you, I need you here. So, that having that person, having that male figure that you can talk to, have that group of males that you can talk to and unapologetically tell them everything and anything and not have that response is good. So I think that men as men need to have more groups, Yeah.
Definitely all kinds of, I've gotten I'm not somebody who has a huge network or a ton of different friends, but I've gotten so much fulfillment out of the few really strong men that I stay close with, that I know I can bring that sort of issue to, or those sort of emotions, I know I can bring it to, and they're going to hold me accountable. So I think everybody needs a few friends like that in their corner, for sure. Well, toxic masculinity, how do you feel like having this culture of toxic masculinity, how do you feel like that kind of breeds other socioeconomic issues, like, say, racism, homophobia, things like that?
So my culture is big, man. We've had a few suicides lately, and in the Black culture, there's no show of emotion, right? There's no expression. You don't convey love. Conveyance of love to another male, it does not exist. That's considered homosexual in nature, or whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
That in itself is very toxic. I think that a lot of times, why we have some of the challenges in my culture is because of that fact. I see it in other ones where, again, culturally or whatever, it's different, right? And I don't want to talk out of turn because I'm, not Caucasian, but I was raised predominantly white area, right? And the guys that raised me, the men that kind of, took me on, they were a lot more expressive. Like one of the guys that's kind of like a father figure to me, his name is Jack. Big burly white dude, right?
Yeah.
What I loved about Jack is big, tough guy, but he's always so emotionally expressive. Like I'd see him and he'd come over and give me this big hug and say, how are you doing? Like he'd say, I love you, all these things, but he was very visibly different than what I was used to black men, right?
Yeah.
So, that was a different framing. That was a different framework. I think that, culturally we're different in that way. I think that we can learn from, one another in that, but I think that the masculinity at many instances gets in the way.
Yeah.
It gets in the way. Like I ran track, or I played football, and in that, if you're hurt, you get injured, you do not tell anyone. When I was in my freshman year in high school, I lost a good friend of mine to football. He actually died. He got injured in the game before, and I guess it was, they didn't find it, but he had an aneurysm.
Wow.
He kept playing, and the next game that he played, it ended up rupturing, so he ended up dying. Right. Wow. And again, all that could have been prevented had he just expressed to his dad, like, hey, it's so many years.
Doesn't feel right. Yeah.
He was telling his girlfriend what we didn't realize the week of that last game that could have prevented or saved his life is that whole week he was throwing up, he was having huge headaches, and a lot of stuff that were visible signs that he was in some kind of distress.
Yeah, if that went to a personal trainer or something like that, somebody who was even somewhat of a medical professional, they probably would have been able to say, hey, this is serious, you need to look at this.
Yeah, no more hits, you're done.
Yeah, but that's the kind of thing that if you go to some dads, you'd hear, tough it out, man up, you'll be all right.
Yeah.
It's the big game,
Right.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Okay. And I think, honestly, what you just said, I think that men like that mentor, or the guy that you knew named Jack, I think that's the real answer to shaping the next generation. I don't think it's something that you or I could just go solve by ourselves. I think that essentially what we need for the next generation to be better is we just need as many men as possible embodying the right qualities of what it means to be an alpha, setting the right example. Because you saw that guy Jack and you thought, okay, I can say I love you to a man and that doesn't make me gay. And at the time, your mind's probably like blown,
Right.
you know, but all of a sudden you realize that next thing you know, okay, you can actually say I love you. You can actually share love with another man like that without it being perceived as something that's gay or anything like that. So I think that's the real answer, honestly, is we get as many strong men out there embodying the right qualities, whether they're in sports or in business or on a podcast or whatever. It's just people that the younger generation can look up to.
And you go back to your point that you said about love. Why that's so important for a male to show that is because men, we know the power that word has. So what do? We throw it around to women all the time because we know that they understand the context. So then it starts losing its symbolism, right? So to be able to give that and be able to use that and realize, oh my gosh, it has the same form, and I don't just have to throw it around anyway because I think that I can use this power. Is huge. It's huge. It's huge.
Okay. And, out there, can you share some examples of some of the different types of men that you've seen kind of get canceled by society and what you think led to that?
Yeah, I've seen a lot, so we can, top off the top of my head, you can say Will Smith.
Yeah.
Right. Who's another couple that I can say? Well, just any of those guys from, any of the movie industries, like the Weinsteins or any of those directors. Some of the actors that I really looked up and admired, like I used to love Kevin Spacey, and why these guys are getting canceled, right? We used to think that these guys were so amazing and all that, but these guys also were giving that title of alpha and player or whatever.
Yeah.
So they were allowed, they were entitled, they felt entitled, and they felt as though they can do anything without any harm. And now we're finding out that you can't do those things. You can't, go around, doing whatever you want and not thinking that it's going to have, fallout. So, yeah, so many of those. The Will Smith one was tough because, I think the world saw this guy kind of coming unglued, right?
Yeah.
You saw, all the toxicity and what he believed that he is.
Yeah.
Just unveiling.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I can definitely see that.
Everybody all those things that he was trying to defend were none of his own.
Yeah.
He was defending a world that he didn't really believe in, but he had to. So all that toxic masculinity boiled over, and the world saw it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's switch gears a little bit because I haven't gotten to talk to you a lot about fitness, and I mean some of the things that you shared with us when we were getting prepared and getting to know each other were pretty impressive. So I mean you've been sporting a 4% body fat percentage year round, is that right?
Yeah, man, it is.
Okay, so I've been working out and doing cardio and eating for about a year now, and I've got myself down to like 15%. That was a stretch for me, and I felt like I was starving at that point. So, how'd you get into fitness for starters? I know you obviously weren't living an incredibly healthy lifestyle back when you were using and drinking that much. So, what did that transition look like into the fitness world for you?
No, you know what? I've always been fitness oriented since I can remember. Like I started weight training when I was 8. The area that I lived in, I played football at a really early age. My dad was kind of like a trainer type guy.
Yeah.
But he saw me getting into a lot of mischief, and football and sports only go for so long. So my dad's like, in the meantime, I got to keep this kid idle. So he found a weight bench, and from there I was hooked, right? It was something that I can do. I can put all my energy in, and I didn't have to have anybody else there.
Yeah, it's a healthy outlet.
Man, and the thing that I like about the body is that it's one of those things that, no matter, you can always see the return. Everything you put in, you can get out. And joking about the body fat and all that, man, it's good and bad. You know, it's good and bad. I've always been what you call a hard gainer, meaning it's hard for me to gain weight. So I metabolize things incredibly fast, so I burn. So it's hard for me to build muscle, like where opposed to you might be, easier at that, the fitness for me has always been my outlet. It's always been my form of expression. Even as much as I'm expressing here, sometimes I feel like I haven't been able to convey how I felt. I feel like with my body, it's always the way I express myself. I feel like it's my way to convey my art, right? Yeah. And that's what I love about other bodybuilders that do it. And they say bodybuild, right? I don't call myself a weightlifter as such. Bodybuilder, building a specific shape. So yeah, that's always my thing, man. I call myself like a body artist, right? Like when people see me, and the thing that was so important with that is I wasn't always the guy with the oratory. I used to stammer a lot. I was very soft-spoken. I'm still kind of soft-spoken. But I think with presence, that was always the thing that differentiated me from everybody else. Like people see me like, yeah, look at this guy, and not have to talk much,
Yeah.
But that only lasts for so long. Then I figured out I had to cultivate a voice to go with this strong presence.
Yeah, that's awesome. And as you transitioned into fitness, you were lifting at a very young age, and you identified that. At what point did you start actually working it into your career?
Yeah, so after after the automotive thing kind of went, kaput or whatever, I started to put more emphasis on training because I've always enjoyed that. And a lot of people ask me, hey man, you look amazing. I want to look like you do. Mm-hmm. So my lady actually told me, she's like, why don't you just start training people? You make your own schedule, you do it, like whatever. Initially, I went after just everybody. I went after broad demographic like every trainer does. Like you're going to do that, you're going to put yourself in a cesspool with everybody else.
Yeah.
My differentiator was because of my modeling, because of my, my other careers, I knew people, like I knew celebrities. So I'm like, why don't I just be a celebrity trainer? And so I started going after the football players, the actors, the models that I knew. Yeah. Because, again, that in itself, even though these people look amazing, there's certain other aspects they might not know that I had. So I started going after them. And, celebrity training, these persons, which they're no different, than us, but there's a different nuance to it. It's like, how do you train somebody that might have a movie or that's going on tour or that might have like, a week, but then they are going to be gone for months because they're traveling abroad. Like, yeah. How do you manage that, that relationship? So I went into that, and it's been incredibly rewarding.
Awesome. How long have you been doing that now?
It's been about 4 or 5 years.
Nice. Yeah. Awesome. And so what have been some of your favorite clients that you've worked with so far, and why? Like what have been some of the most rewarding experiences training people?
So a lot of the football guys are fun, right?
Yeah.
So one of my good guys, my guy Jonathan Cooper, he was a first round draft pick, This guy was, when you talk about manifesting thing or the importance of visualization, when he decided he wanted to play football, one day, he wrote down every goal that he wanted to have. I want to be first team all SEC. I wanted to this and that. And he made it come true. Yeah. And it was like hearing his story and hearing that framework. So one thing that you and I can do, like, we can talk about the successful people that we know. When you get to that landscape of, professional football players and some of these aspects that it's less than 2% of the people that ever do that, yep. It's a completely different conversation. Yep. It's a completely different conversation. And again, even the nuance to like what they think about versus what we do, and I was driven by that, because I've been in capacities like the agencies that I would have signed with and the jobs, the campaigns that I would have booked. Nobody did that. So I want to know what that looks like from the other aspect. Like I played football, but I never got that high. I went to high school, didn't go to college, play football college, but what does that look like? So yeah, it's been incredibly rewarding.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. And, everybody wants to get in shape. It's not, I guess we can't say everybody, but it's something that almost everyone out there is interested in. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people have one of these same realizations as me, that it's like, hey, you know what? I'm 31 years old. It's time to make some healthy habits if I want to be in good shape.
Yes, sir.
So what would be your best advice to, your average person out there who maybe they don't want to, maybe they're not training for a movie, maybe they're not training for something big coming up, but they really just want to develop some healthy lifestyle habits. So what would be your advice to anyone like that?
I would say, cut out fast food.
Yeah.
Try to make sure that everything's all organic. Like, so my lady and I say single ingredient food, like anything that you can look at that you can pronounce. If you can't pronounce it, you cannot eat it. That's a prerequisite to my clients. Yeah. Activity is good. Motion creates emotion. So in this day where we're stripped from serotonin and we have so many people struggling and suffering from, emotional dis-ease, motion is everything. So get out and walk, so, you don't have to train incessantly, but my lady and I walk 10,000 steps. They talk about how much cardiovascular does to just add and age it to, years to your life. Yeah. So do that. And water. Water's life, man. 70% of our body is water, and we just don't hydrate or drink enough of it. They're finding a lot of the conditions or the ailments that we're having are because of poor hydration. So really simply do that, man. Motion to motion. Try to stay active. Cut down stress.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that you can do that, not many people, not everybody wants to look like me. They don't want to do this, but they want to look fit and be healthy. So those components.
Well, I would argue that almost everybody does want to look like you. They just maybe know it's not quite attainable.
Right.
Like, I don't know anybody that's going to look at you and be like, "Ah, that body, 4% body fat's just not for me. I'd rather have 25% body fat."
Right.
But maybe they know that that's a little that's going to require a little more discipline than they're willing to muster. So.
It could be that, like,
Yeah.
I've actually heard people say, no, I don't want to look like you. I mean, I want to get in good shape, but I have no desire. I'm like, okay.
I can remember saying all of those things when I was out of shape. Like,
Yeah.
saying like, oh, yeah, I don't think I'd want to. I think it's more you're like trying to kind of temper expectations, I guess.
100%.
Yeah. But now that I'm like in it, it's like, yeah, I mean, I want to get better and better and better every month and every year. So I don't want to take anything off the table for myself.
And it's funny because a lot of people are like, but I'm so tired. I don't have energy. I don't have this. And they don't realize that once you start training, you do some of these things. How much energy do you have now?
Way more energy. Yes. Yep. I'm sleeping better and I'm getting up, like jumping out of bed in the morning, ready to rock. So.
And you're healthier, right?
Yeah.
So again, it's weird. And I tell people about the validation loop that it has. You start doing these things, you start feeling better, and it validates the reason why you're doing them. So it continues a perpetual loop. But all you have to do is do it. You have to get started, right?
Definitely. Well, what are some of your goals moving forward? I mean, you've accomplished a lot. You're in a great spot in your life. And what are some of the things you've got coming up for yourself?
You know what I really do? I would really like to kind of take on a better role with some of these teams, right? Like I see some of these athletes and some of these teams out there. I'd love to be a wellness director for one of them. So I've been actively kind of putting together a program for what that looks like. And what people don't realize is a lot of these functioning athletes, these professionals, they're able to drink and they have pills there at their disposal. So I want to be able to educate them on what healthy living looks like within working with that frame of professional sports. So there has to be a wellness director for that. I want to, because, we didn't talk about this much and I'm kind of careful on it, but I'm a plant medicine advocate. I work in the cannabis space. And cannabis for us is the number one gateway off of anything, especially benzos, opioids, and all those heavy things. So want to normalize more of what cannabis is opposed to what it's not, right? What it does. So that and yeah, man, hopefully one day, go on Rogan.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And, I mean, you've been in so many different industries and you've had a really, really well-rounded career so far. So I'd be curious to know, what do you consider like some of your most rewarding moments or your most successful moments? It doesn't even need to be success in the conventional sense, but what have been some of the most rewarding moments of your career so far?
Yeah, so a little while ago, I would have had some like amazing answer to give you. I would have like pinpointed like the birth of my daughter and and they are like they are very poignant moments in my life. But I think this moment right here is amazing. I think that what I used to do is I used to live and try to plan out and fill this void of all these moments. And I think that now I live for the moment. So this moment right here is the one that I'm living for, like this right here.
Yeah. That was a pretty awesome answer. It's a pretty incredible answer. Yeah. So you're focused on making this moment right now, wherever you may be at that particular moment, the best, most rewarding moment that you've got. I love that. Awesome. Well, Charles, I've loved having you on the show, man. I think you brought a ton of value to everybody who's going to see this. And if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
My socials, I'd say you can get a hold of me on Instagram. I'm on Instagram, Charles_J_Flanagan. I'm on Facebook, Charles J. Flanagan. I have a website page is still in production. But on that, you'll have all ways to book me or contact me and any of that fun stuff. But I love any kind of conversation. If anybody wants to slide in my DMs, I'm not weird about that. I love when people slide in my DMs. Those are the basic ways to get a hold of me.
Loves to connect.
I love to connect.
All right. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks again. Thank you so much, Charles. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate you. Thank you, Joe.
Awesome.
Thank you.